Good morning, good-looking people, and you're good-looking because you're always looking, and of course you are finding the good in everything and in everybody. Hope you're well, hope you're having a great weekend. Today we're going to do the Hayom Yom for yesterday, which was Shabbos, the 17th of Shevat. So it's a longer Hayom Yom, it's informative, but I would like to start with kind of the concept and the message up front. So every generation has a Rebbe. And every Rebbe has their own chassidus that they give over, but it's passed down from generation to generation. How the Maimorim and the chassidus that's given starts before them and before them and before them. And in today's Hayom Yom, we're focusing on a specific Maimer, and it's talking about specifically in this Maimer about the words liyasnai. So in the Parsha we talked about how there was the splitting of the sea. And it says that after the sea split, it says that it uses the word liyasnai, which means God commanded the sea to go back to its original stipulation. So there's a play on the words liyasnai. One way is to say that it went back to its original strength, and I'll explain that in a moment. And the other one is to say lisna'o, which means that it went back to its original stipulation. And here's the difference between the two. The concept that's being discussed in that Maimer, and just very small portion of it, is that when God created the sea, He gave it a very specific instruction that in so many years, there's going to be the Jewish people, that they're going to be crossing the water. And at that moment in time, it's your job to open up, and the people will walk through, and then you will return back to its original strength. So that is the concept that's being discussed in the Maimer, and that's for a completely different time. But what's very interesting is that as the generations going from the Baal Shem Tov all the way down to the Tzemach Tzedek, and they're talking about how they all heard this Maimer, and each time it was given over with a little bit different flavor from the Rebbe before them, all the way to our Rebbe now, who also gave a Maimer on this specific portion and added his own. And the concept of the day is there's the inner, like the divine nucleus of the person. It's called the Yechida. It's the divine, what's the word? The divine soul. That's the nucleus of the person. It's called the Yechida. Now, there's also something that explains that the teachings of Chassidus are the Yechida of the Torah. That Chassidus is that divine soul of the whole Torah. It goes further and explains that the Rebbe of the generation is the Yechida of the Jewish people. That the Rebbe represents the people, that connection that we have with the Rebbe, and the Rebbe represents all of us to God. And that this connection to God that the Rebbe represents, it has no boundaries, it has no restrictions. So that connection with the Rebbe is very important. Every generation after generation that the Rebbeim would pass down to the next Rebbe, they would give them this Yechida, they would give them this responsibility to take and represent the Jewish nation and the Jewish people. However, each Rebbe had his own way of doing it. And that's what's represented in today's Hayom Yom. That's what's represented in today's explanation of the same Maimer being passed down, that every Rebbe has their responsibility, but they also have their own way of saying it, their own way of giving it. And it just also shows how unique, how amazing the way Chassidus was passed down from generation to generation. So that is what's being brought up today. I will read the Hayom Yom inside. I will give you some notes as we go through it. It's a little bit longer, but that was the messaging of the day. So for Yud Zayin Shvat, first of all, a couple instructions. It's customary to stand while the Shira, the Song of the Sea, is read in the shul. So there's a note here that it's also very similar to Hallel. So just like when we read Hallel, whether it's on Rosh Chodesh or any specific day, that we stand the same way when we read the Shira, which is the song while the splitting of the sea, we also stand at that moment. Continuing, the Haftarah for Parshas Beshalach begins with Udvara Isa Neviah, and then the last instruction is it is customary to eat buckwheat on this day. And there's another note here that the Chassam Sofer, as well as many others, say the reason for the minhag of eating buckwheat on Parshas Beshalach is because it reminds us of the man. All right, moving to the Hayom Yom. On Shabbos Parshas Beshalach in 1861, the Tzemach Tzedek delivered the mimer entitled Re'u Ki Havaya, which appears on the Kutei Tzara. He later told his son, my revered grandfather, the Rebbe Marash, as follows. On Shabbos Parshas Beshalach in 1805, so now he's showing how it was passed down from generation to generation. So in 1805, my revered grandfather, the Alter Rebbe, delivered the mimer and called me and told me that in the year 1769, when he was studying in Mezrich, the Maggid of Mezrich also called him to his room and told him this mimer. On Shabbos Parshas Beshalach in 1756, the Baal Shem Tov delivered this mimer as well. And before the dawn, the sea returned to its original strength, the phrase of which our sages interpret as the meaning according to its stipulation, again going to the word liyasnai. What's important here at this moment is seeing how they're all referencing the mimer from the person before them. So now we're already back to the Baal Shem Tov that gave it in 1756. And it continues as follows. In 1761, this was a year, was a year after the passing of the Baal Shem Tov. The Maggid continued that my master, which was the Baal Shem Tov, appeared to me and delivered the mimer again, adding an explanation of the concept of fulfilling the will as a distinct from fulfilling the utterances of the omnipresent. So what's important here, again, it's going through the mimer, but there's a nice note here saying that there are 10 utterances that brought the world into being and that creates it into its natural order. It says God's will transcends this natural order, which is the source of the miracles. And what he was adding here is, being that God's will transcends the order, that is the source of the miracle, which is one of the miracles that we're talking about is the splitting of the sea. So the Baal Shem Tov was adding that this is another point to that mimer. So today, concluded the Alter Rebbe, my master the Maggid appeared to me to also review the mimer. So at this moment, he's saying that they're having all these different revelations and dreams of all the Rebbeim coming generation after generation to the Rebbe of that time, sharing the mimer, explaining the mimer in their own way. The Maggid delivered the mimer before the Alter Rebbe and added an explanation regarding the splitting of the Gnai River for Pinchas ben Yair, likened it to the splitting of the Sea of Reeds. Again, not to go deep into this section, but another area where the mimer is being given over and then more flavor is being added to the mimer. The Tzemach Tzedek then concluded, after sharing this about how the mimer was brought down and how everybody had a piece that was added to it. He said, today the Baal Shem Tov, the Maggid, and my revered grandfather appeared to me. Each of them delivered the mimer according to their own style. A few hours later, the Tzemach Tzedek again summoned my revered grandfather, the Rebbe Marash, and gave him an explanation of that mimer. I know it's a long Hayom Yom, but again, what's very interesting is to see how every generation has a Rebbe, and every generation has the pass down of the Chassidus, and each one has their way of adding and building, that each portion is very important. Every part is another taste, it's another flavor being added to the Chassidus. And when we're learning Chassidus, everything that we're learning, we have to know that when we're learning this, we're also connecting to all the Rebbeim beforehand, because each one has a piece. Everybody's connected, and it's generation after generation, and that the Rebbe of that generation would bring it out in their own way and have their own way of being that representative to connect all the Jewish people to God, and being that, let's say that bridge would be a nice word, that representing all of us. I know there's a lot in Hayom Yom. I hope I did it justice today. Have a wonderful day, and we'll do the 18th of Shevat in a little bit.